A massive fire broke out earlier this morning at a lithium battery factory in Hwaseong, killing at least 16 people. Concerns are growing as the number of victims is likely to increase. South Korea's commander-in-chief orders full security readiness over deepening military cooperation between North Korea and Russia. Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo also voiced condemnation of the Moscow-Pyongyang pact in the strongest possible terms. Russia claims U.S.-supplied ATACMS were used by Ukraine against Crimea over the weekend, saying 4 people were killed and over 100 injured. It has vowed to mount a retaliation. It's June 24, 2024. This is Newscenter. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Min. We start our coverage with unfortunate breaking news. A massive fire at a battery factory in Hwaseong, Gyeonggi-do Province has reportedly killed a number of people. We have our Choi Soo-hyung on the line. Soo-hyung, how's the situation going?
Yes, Jungmin, at 10:31 a.m., a fire broke out at a lithium battery manufacturer here in Hwaseong. According to the fire authorities, 16 people have reportedly lost their lives so far. In addition, 7 seriously injured people were moved to nearby hospitals for treatment. After the initial fire at the Arirang factory was extinguished, firefighters said there could be the possibility of further spontaneous combustion of batteries. In addition, they expect more casualties as 21 people have been reported missing, most of them foreign workers. The factory had approximately 35,000 lithium batteries on site and about 100 workers were there at the time. Due to the composition of the batteries, which are difficult to extinguish with water and could continue to ignite spontaneously when exposed to very high temperatures, it was initially challenging for firefighters to access the inside of the facility. The fire authorities immediately issued a second-stage response system and announced they were able to control the fire at around 3 p.m. The government activated the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasure Headquarters in response to the fire and casualties. President Yoon urged on-site officials to do their utmost in rescue operations. Specific details regarding the missing, final casualty totals, and the cause of the fire have yet to be confirmed. The search and rescue operations inside the facility are still ongoing. That's all I have for now. Back to you, Jungmin.
Our Choi Soo-hyung live on the line. Shifting gears, President Yoon called the security situation around the Korean Peninsula, quote, severe, and ordered his top aides to make every effort to ensure a thorough readiness to deal with potential threats. This is according to the President's Senior Secretary for Public Relations, Lee Do-eun, on Monday, following Yoon's weekly meeting with his top secretaries. Lee further explained that the directive emphasized the need to maintain a firm military readiness posture and economic security following the strategic partnership treaty signed between Russia and North Korea last week and the situation in the Middle East. Against this backdrop, senior officials in South Korea, the U.S., and Japan released a joint statement today condemning deepening Pyongyang-Moscow military ties in the strongest possible terms. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Kim Jong-sil reports.
South Korea, the U.S., and Japan have released a joint statement following the summit between Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. South Korean Vice Foreign Minister for Strategy and Intelligence Cho Kure and his U.S. and Japanese counterparts Chung Bak and Hiroyuki Namazu said the 3 countries condemn in the strongest possible terms deepening military cooperation between the DPRK and Russia, including continued arms transfers from the DPRK to Russia that prolong the suffering of the Ukrainian people, violate multiple United Nations Security Council resolutions, and threaten stability in both Northeast Asia and Europe. The Washington Post reported over the weekend that North Korea likely shipped 1.6 million artillery shells of the type Russia uses in its war against Ukraine from August through January. The statement came as the 3 countries also gear up to hold their first trilateral multi-domain exercise this week. Taking part is the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt that arrived in Busan over the weekend.
Freedom Edge is a significant exercise because it is an opportunity to practice and cooperate between the United States, Korea, and Japan. With the Theodore Roosevelt, which is one of the most advanced versions of a U.S. aircraft carrier, the trilateral nations will be able to exercise all the aspects of multi-domain operations.
North Korea has issued strong protests ahead of the drill, especially following the arrival of the Roosevelt. On Monday, the North Korean Ministry of Defense released a statement saying that Pyongyang was witnessing yet again the reckless choices and actions by the U.S. It added that the U.S. and South Korea are playing a very dangerous game and taking an adventure against the North, stressing that North Korea condemns in the strongest possible terms the provocative actions by the U.S. and South Korea and saying it was open to all possibilities of deterrence demonstrations against Seoul and Washington. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
The U.S. AC-130J aircraft, also known as the Ghost Rider, is currently in the country for joint aerial drills with South Korean forces. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung was at the Osan Air Base to take a closer look at the gunship.
The heavily armed U.S. AC-130J aircraft made a second visit to South Korea earlier this month. For the occasion, U.S. Forces Korea Monday held a special press conference at the Osan Air Base in the city of Pyeongtaek, providing a closer look at the gunship, also known as the Ghost Rider. As you can see behind me, the Ghost Rider is a key U.S. military asset and remains one of the most requested aircraft by ground forces. The AC-130J is a traditional C-130J cargo aircraft modified with an array of sensors and weapons. Its primary missions are close air support, air interdiction, and armed reconnaissance. The Ghost Rider can be armed with 30mm and 105mm cannons and fire precision-guided weapons.
When you pair all of those weapons with the constant left-hand turn that a gunship is known for flying, our weapons are continuously pointed in the direction of any potential targets. Simply put, the speed at which we can engage rounds on target in less than 30 seconds, that is unmatched by any aircraft in the world. That allows us to deliver rapid, persistent, and accurate fire support that is very unique to the gunship.
The Ghost Rider was first and last deployed to South Korea in March last year for live fire exercises. And last week, South Korean and U.S. forces conducted their second joint drills over the Korean Peninsula involving the aircraft.
We've not forgotten our commitment to the Ironclad Alliance to defend our homelands, a commitment born out of the blood and 70 years of working together to ensure a safe and peaceful peninsula. Since then, we've steadfastly maintained a deterrence posture with a credible special operations force to prevent conflict, while also giving senior leaders options and the knowledge that we will prevail if needed.
The U.S. gunship arrived approximately 2 weeks ago and is set to depart later this week after conducting additional training events. The drills involving the Ghost Rider come amid escalating tensions on the Korean Peninsula following deepening military cooperation between North Korea and Russia. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News, Pyeongtaek.
On the international front, Russia blames the U.S. for the recent Ukrainian attack against Crimea, reportedly involving U.S.-supplied missiles, and vows to retaliate. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, on the other hand, has urged Ukraine's partners to bolster its air defense. Cha Eun-kyung has more.
The Russian Defense Ministry says that 5 U.S.-provided Army Tactical Missile System, or ATACMS, rockets were shot down by Russian air defense systems over the city of Sevastopol on the Crimean Peninsula on Sunday. The fragments from the 5th rocket were detonated in midair, causing numerous casualties on the ground. Russian officials said on Sunday that at least 5 civilians were killed and more than 100 people were injured.
It was on a summer holiday, on a nice weather day when people were resting on the beach.
Russia has blamed the United States with its foreign ministry, saying that responsibility lies with Washington for supplying Ukraine with the weapons.
We will seek a response. We will do everything to ensure that the international community is notified of the latest crimes of the Kiev regime.
The U.S. has been supporting Ukraine with military aid to only defend against Russia's invasion and gave Ukraine permission to use American weapons to strike inside Russia. However, the U.S. did not allow the use of ATACMS missiles, which have a range of 300 kilometers. According to the New York Times on Sunday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called on the allies to ease the restrictions on the use of Western weapons against Russian air bases, as bombs had been dropped by Russian warplanes on residential districts in the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv on Saturday. President Zelensky reiterated on social media that striking Russian airfields is also entirely justified, and he needs a joint security decision with his partners. On the other hand, U.S. Major General Patrick Ryder recently mentioned that there has been no change in the policy regarding Ukraine's use of ATACMS, and the policy only comes down to counterfire. 차윤경, Arirang News.
In Saudi Arabia, more than 1,300 people lost their lives during this year's Hajj, according to its health ministry, and most of them were unauthorized pilgrims who trekked through excruciating heat waves. Lee Seung-jae has more.
The Hajj is an annual Islamic pilgrimage to Mecca, the holiest city for Muslims located in Saudi Arabia. The pilgrimage is a mandatory religious duty that must be carried out by all adult Muslims at least once in their lifetime who are physically and financially capable of making the trip. However, this year's Hajj, which ran from June 14th to 19th, turned deadly as Saudi Arabia says over 1,300 people died during the 6-day pilgrimage period this year. Releasing the official figures for the first time, the government said Sunday that 1,301 pilgrims died, mostly due to heat stress. Temperatures above 51 degrees Celsius were recorded during this period, with many people walking long distances under direct sunlight without adequate shelter or comfort. Of the dead, 83% were not authorized to make the pilgrimage. Saudi Arabia requires licenses to legally access Mecca, with 1.8 million issued each year. As licenses can cost several thousand US, many make unauthorized pilgrimages. Those without proper documents don't travel in organized tour buses with air conditioning or easy access to water and food supplies. The permits are allocated to countries on a quota system and are distributed through a lottery. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea's exports are expected to reach new heights this year on the back of the booming chip and auto industries. According to the Korea International Trade Association on Tuesday, the total value of exports this year is expected to rise just over 9% compared to last year, coming to $690 billion for the first time in history. This comes close to meeting the government's target of $700 billion for exports by the end of 2024. The agency attributed this to the flourishing semiconductor and auto industries, predicting that outbound shipments of chips will rise nearly 32% year-on-year due to the fast-growing AI sector and increased demand for IT products in China. The city of Incheon is hosting the 2024 UN Public Service Forum, a 3-day platform for information sharing on innovative examples of public service. Taking center stage has been integrating AI and public services to meet people's needs. Our Yang Hee-young has this report.
The 2024 United Nations Public Service Forum, co-organized by South Korea's Ministry of the Interior and Safety and the UN, opened on Monday in Songdo, Incheon. Under the theme Fostering Innovation Amid Global Challenges, a public sector perspective, the event brings together 2,000 participants from over 100 countries to discuss key issues in public service.
The forum is the most prestigious international event in the public service sector. It is expected to help promote Korea's outstanding digital companies worldwide and expand their opportunities for going global.
During a keynote speech, former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon addressed international solidarity for achieving the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals.
But our world, as well as the technological advancement that power it, is vastly different than it was in 2015 when the UN SDGs were adopted. Thus, public institutions and officials must keep pace with such changes and advance sustainable solutions in a more innovative manner.
Taking part in this year's plenary session, the Digital Technologies Minister of Uzbekistan, next year's host country, emphasized the importance of governments understanding their mission when integrating AI in public services. He added that Uzbekistan and South Korea have a long-standing cooperation in terms of e-government.
This long-standing cooperation really helped us to improve our views as well as our approaches to e-government implementation in Uzbekistan. We were in constant discussion in terms of reviewing the methodologies, learning from Korean government as well. From the infrastructure point of view, we are already cooperating with South Korea on increasing our data center capabilities.
The event also features an exhibition showcasing innovative public services, and one of them is South Korea's digital platform government, which uses digital technologies like AI to provide services tailored to people's needs.
Korea is considered one of the leading countries in government innovation, including digital governments, and has successfully shared examples of outstanding policies with all UN member states. The main contents of the exhibition include the background and basic principles of the digital platform government, a zero required document system, and national security program, and CCTV traffic volume analysis, you name it.
The three-day event will wrap up on Wednesday with the UN Public Service Awards ceremony, where 15 innovative achievements by public service institutions will be recognized. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
The second leg of the country's high-speed commuter rail service begins its operation this Saturday. The ultimate goal is to bring a number of cities in Gyeonggi-do province within commuting range of capital Seoul. Lee Soo-jin has more.
The next stop on Seoul's high-speed commuter line is set to open by the end of this month. The Transportation Ministry announced that the GTX-A line will be stopping at Hwaseong Station starting June 29. It's the next station to open on the GTX-A line following the opening of Suseol in southern Seoul and Seongnam and Dongtan in the neighboring Gyeonggi-do province in March this year. And they're all part of the South Korean government's plan to make it faster for people to commute to their jobs in Seoul. People who get on at Hwaseong Station will now be able to reach the city in around 15 minutes compared to the 36 minutes on the existing Suin-Bundang line. And it'll cost only 3,950 won, or around $3. As for the rest of the line, the northern section is scheduled to open in the second half of the year, followed by the connection between Seoul Station and Suseol in 2026, and finally the stop at Samsung Station, one of the nation's most used subway stations, in 2028. The government is also hoping that the opening of this station will boost the ridership of the GTX-A line, which is currently lower than expected.
Passengers can transfer from the Suin-Bundang line, which is expected to raise ridership, and it's a station that represents Yongin City.
And ahead of the opening of the new stop on the line, the government also carried out radiation inspections in a move to mitigate concerns about extra electrical substations being built to supply electricity for the GTX lines. According to an official, radiation below the World Health Organization's guidance level of 83.3 microtesla doesn't have any health risks.
The level of radiation detected from the substations just 3 meters away was not only under the WHO's guidance level, but also lower than what's emitted from hairdryers and microwaves.
The tests that were carried out in the electrical substation came to around 2.7 microtesla and on ground level around 0.04 microtesla. With the opening of more stations like this on the GTX-A line scheduled in the coming months, more people will be able to enjoy faster and safer accessibility to the city. 이수진, Arirang News.
Time now to take a look at what's been happening in the world of sports. With us in the studio is our sports editor, Paul Need. Hi, Paul.
Hello there.
Let's first start with golf. South Korean golfer Yang Hee-young, as she has secured her first victory at the LPGA Major.
Yes, that's right. It came at the KPMG Women's PGA Championship on Sunday. Yang shot an even par 72 on the final day at Sahali Country Club in Sammamish, Washington, to win by 3 strokes at 7 under par overall. She takes home over $1.5 million in prize money and also a spot at the upcoming Paris Olympics. The 34-year-old made her debut on the LPGA Tour way back in 2008. Meanwhile, in the men's game, Kim Joo-hyung came second at the PGA Travelers Championship, losing in a narrow playoff to Scottie Scheffler.
And moving on to baseball and Kim Hwaseong's exploits in MLB, another milestone for him.
Yes, you're right. He hit his 10th home run of the season on Saturday. This is the 3rd season in a row now that Kim has hit double figures for home runs, having hit 17 last year and 11 the year before. It came in the San Diego Padres' win over the Milwaukee Brewers and off of their starting pitcher Carlos Rodriguez with 2 outs and no runners on base. It came in the bottom of the 4th inning. It was his first home run in 2 weeks and made the score 4-0 in what was an eventual 6-4 win. Now, what makes this achievement all the more impressive is the fact that only Chu Shin-soo has been able to reach double figures for 3 years in a row or more. The Padres sit second in the National League West and face the Washington Nationals next.
And to archery, a big win for South Korea with the Paris Olympics just around the corner.
Yes, medals for both the men's and the women's teams. They came at the 2024 Hyundai Archery World Cup Stage 3 in Antalya, Turkey on Sunday. A team made up of Im Si-hyun, Jeon Hoon-young and Nam Soo-hyun dominated France 6-0 in the women's recurve team final. The men's team of Kim Woo-jin, Lee Woo-sok and Kim Jae-dok also triumphed over France with a score of 5-1. Also in the recurve team final, Kim Woo-jin also won gold in the men's individual event, beating Brazil's Marcos de Almeida 6-5. Meanwhile, in the mixed team of Jeon Hoon-young and Lee Woo-sok, they won silver after losing to Japan in the final.
And finally, to football and the European Championship in Germany. What is the latest?
Well, every team has now played at least 2 games in the group stage, and Group A have actually played all of their matches, which means that Scotland are now out. 4 teams are through to the next phase, which means that 12 more spots are still to be decided. In Group A, Germany and Switzerland are through, as to Spain from Group B and Portugal from Group F. For Portugal, their captain Ronaldo is now on 14 goals from 6 different Euros. That's the most goals, and with 5 assists, he also has the joint most assists at the Euros finals, as well as the most appearances with 26, having now appeared at a record 6 Euros, every one since the year 2004. Now, defender Pepe is the oldest player to feature at a Euros at the age of 41. This is a Euros that has also seen the youngest player to feature, Spain's Lamine Yamal, at just 16. The action continues in the early hours of Tuesday in Korea time.
Lots more to look forward to then. Thanks for that, Paul. See you next time.
Thank you.
With rain, the temperatures was below 30 degrees Celsius in most parts of the country today. Seoul and Gwangju were at 28 degrees. However, since the weather was humid, the feels like temperatures were higher. After the rain stopped today, the cold air will move south and tomorrow's temperatures will be lower than today. There will be no rain across the country tomorrow. Until tomorrow, strong winds will continue in the eastern parts of Gangwon-do province. In addition, high waves will be seen on the east coast for the time being. Please refrain from going near the coastlines. Tomorrow morning, Seoul, Gwangju, and Daegu will start off at 19 degrees. It will move up to 28 in Chuncheon, Daejeon, and Gwangju, Gyeongju 30 degrees. More rain is forecast on the southern coast and Jeju Island again from Wednesday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.
Children's laughter, hope, dream. K-animation belongs in them. Interesting and valuable story that transcends between everyday life and dream. Surprising spectacle where imagination becomes real. An array of subjects catering from infants to adolescents. For our story to reach all corners of the world. K-animation makes healthy laughter for children. Completely new. But something anyone can relate with. Flawlessly made. And tears that go with it. K-drama. Korea is coming at you with another story to tell.
like this? Can you? 야, 한 번만 말한다. 꺼져. I got no time for you, baby. 눈앞에서 꺼져. 내가 등장할 때 너네 무대 불이 꺼져. 모르겠다. 그냥 제발 제발 꺼져. 어쩌는 볼 관심 없어 꺼져. Can you do it like this? Can you move like this? Can you do this? Yo, 관심 없으니까 제발 눈앞에서 꺼져.
Hello and welcome to Within the Frame. I'm Han-dan in Seoul. The threat of a wider war in the Middle East is growing as tensions mount on Israel's northern border. The conflict between Israel and Iran-backed Lebanese militant group Hezbollah have ratcheted up yet again in recent weeks, with the Israeli forces approving a plan for an offensive to push Hezbollah further back from the border, and Hezbollah allegedly using Beirut airport to store Iranian arms. As the world closely watches developments with concerns, UN Chief Antonio Guterres has warned that we must not turn Lebanon into another Gaza, and that a single miscalculation or reckless move could plunge the region into a catastrophic war. Are Israel and Hezbollah on the brink of a full-scale war, and what could the consequences be for the Middle East and beyond? For some insights, we have Aidan Haher, reader in international relations at the University of Westminster, joining us from London. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Also with us tonight is Baek Sung-hoon, researcher at the Institute of Middle East Studies. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, Professor Baek, I want to start with you. So fears are growing over a full-blown war between Israel and Hezbollah after both sides claim to be ready to go to war following an intensification of their cross-border attacks. First, give us an update on the current situation, and for our viewers who may not have been up to date on the issue, why are the Israel-Hezbollah tensions flaring up now?
I think it could be explained in two aspects. As Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had said, the intense phase of fighting in Rafah in southern Gaza is nearly over. He wanted to dismantle the next imminent threat, which is Hezbollah in up north. And after the tragic passing of Iranian President Raisi, Hezbollah has become main adversary of fighting against Israel with the new flying projectiles that are allegedly provided by ILGC. And of course, it is not an easy task to dismantle the Hezbollah, but at least Israel government want to capture higher ground in the negotiation of post-Israel-Hamas warfare. And second aspect is that ever since the war has begun, apart from a direct family members of Israel casualty, and of course Gazan Palestinians, residents of northern Israel were also the primary victims of wars. They have been exposed to Iranian-backed Hezbollah missile attack. Because of that, Netanyahu was and is under intense pressure from opposition and members of his coalition to take action in north, where more than 60,000 of them have been living in the temporary accommodation. So a poll which was conducted by Jewish People Policy Institute found that more than 60% Israeli wants to attack Hezbollah with full force. And Netanyahu is using this to prolong Israel-Hamas war, which need more time for him to settle the dispute in the Knesset and in and out and in international politics. So we could just talk this two aspects, why the tension is growing and why these Hamas and Israel tensions are kind of like, getting into a spiral into a bigger conflict.
Well, Lebanon and Israel have officially been in a state of war for decades, so tensions along the border are nothing new, but a series of events following the Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel, including several deaths of Hezbollah's senior commanders, also seem to have fueled their conflict. And as you highlighted, Netanyahu sees Hezbollah as the next imminent threat. Now, Professor Haher, how do you see the chances of Israel and Hezbollah going into a full-scale war? Some say the chances remain low, as it would be catastrophic for both sides.
Yes, well, as was stated there has been significant hostilities between Hezbollah and Israel since the October the 8th attacks. 60,000 Israelis have been evacuated from their homes in the north of Israel. And on the Lebanese side, more than 90,000 people have been evacuated. So the situation is already one of hostilities. But you could say that neither side would benefit from a war. Clearly, from a humanitarian point of view, from the point of view of the cost of a war, it would be something that both sides would like to avoid. However, there are some in Israel who would potentially like to see a broader war, and unfortunately those voices are becoming louder. A war against Hezbollah would be an advantage to the Israelis in some respects, as it would be able to present this conflict as being about more than just Gaza, as being a war for the very survival of Israel, about Israel fighting against terrorism throughout the Middle East. It would certainly spin it in that way. And, you know, it is worth remembering that this government is very unpopular in Israel, and it's a government that has, demonstrated a willingness to engage in the most egregious violence against the Palestinian people, and would likely think of expanding the war in purely strategic terms, wouldn't see it from the point of view of a humanitarian catastrophe, and would like to, fold the Palestinian conflict into a broader war, which would hopefully, from their point of view, bring the United States more directly involved in the conflict. So essentially, they want to broaden the war purely for their own interests.
So Israel wants to broaden the war, perhaps also drawing in the U.S. for purely their own strategic interests. Hezbollah, fully backed by Iran, is considered a much stronger force than the Hamas militants, which is all the more concerning. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant headed to Washington to hold talks with top U.S. officials, so hopefully a diplomatic solution will come out of his trip. But in the meantime, Professor Peck, U.S. officials have voiced concerns that Hezbollah could overwhelm Israel's air defenses in the north, including the Iron Dome air defense system. How do you assess Hezbollah's attack capabilities?
Many of think tanks in U.S. and U.K., such as CSIS, IISS, has concluded that the Hezbollah have a capabilities to launch up to 3,000 missiles a day, a rate that could be sustained for up to 3 weeks. And if the timing and the location is well planned, it could dismantle the missile defense system of Israel, including the Iron Dome, as that had happened in October 7, 2003, when the Hamas executed their surprise attack. But if we assume in a full-scale warfare, we have witnessed 99% of Iranian missile attack on Israel was intercepted. So we need to be more cautious with our analysis on the capability of Hezbollah. But yes, we shouldn't be giving too much securitization on, backing Israeli going, intervening in southern Lebanon and going to attack on, going on a military operation on southern Lebanon. So we should. We have to be more cautious on these kind of analyzation, because in the context they are putting their own proposal of making this analyzation.
Hezbollah, with an army of more than 100,000 dedicated fighters equipped with thousands of missiles, rockets, and armed drones that can hit targets deep inside Israel, is indeed quite threatening. Those are what we're hearing these days. But we do need to be a bit more cautious when making assessments on their attack capabilities. Now, Professor Haher, what would constitute a red line for Israel and Hezbollah? In other words, what are the potential triggers for Israel and Hezbollah that could escalate into a full-scale conflict?
I think from Hezbollah's point of view, if Israel was to send troops into Lebanon, that would be considered a red line. I think, likewise, if there was further attacks by Israel against Iran or Syria, that would also be considered a significant escalation that Hezbollah would feel compelled to respond to. So those would be, I think, the conditions that would lead to Hezbollah becoming much more directly involved in it. From Israel's point of view, I would imagine that if there was significantly more missile attacks on major cities, if, let's say, Israeli soldiers were taken captive, if there was a bomb that killed a significant number of civilians, let's say if Hezbollah launched an attack and it blew up a school or a hospital or something like that, then again, that would be considered from Israel's point of view a red line. But, you know, it is worth remembering that there is significant anger across the Middle East at the moment, and the general public in many Middle Eastern states would like to see, I think, their own governments taking a much stronger, harder line with Israel. So if Israel was to escalate the attacks and to become more directly involved on the ground in Syria and Lebanon, then that would really, I think, enable that groundswell of anger to explode, essentially, and could force certain states to take action. And, you know, it's worth remembering that there is this axis of resistance involving Iran and Syria and Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis that have, you know, said many, many times that they want us to see essentially the destruction of Israel. And if that was triggered, if that axis was triggered more directly by an Israeli attack, then it could lead to a full-scale conflict very, very quickly.
Dr. Beck, the U.S. and the international community are making concerted efforts to prevent Israel and Hezbollah from descending into an all-out war. But if another devastating war breaks out, how do you foresee the possible impact on the Middle East and the broader global stage?
Global stage. I mean, to be honest, right now, there is not, even if there's a full-scale war happens in Israel and Israel and Hezbollah, I don't think there will be a big shift in the Middle Eastern politics. Because as we could see, I mean, if we compare to that of Israel-Arab conflict of past conflict, I mean, the Jordan, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia and any other Gulf state, there's no incentives for them to engage in and bring a bigger war. And even Biden administration now are offering a deal that Saudi Arabia cannot resist, because they are kind of giving a what do we call the security guarantee, the treaties to the Saudi Arabia to join in the normalization with Israel. So, but the only one concern is Iran. If Iran sees this Hamas, Hezbollah, and Israel start a full-scale warfare, which will lead to the collapse of Hezbollah, then there's a possibility that Iran will gonna fully engage. But it will be the full-scale war between U.S. alliances with the resistance of axis of resistance, so-called Shiite Crescent. But the possibility is highly unlikely, because having said it that in the beginning, that the passing of Raisi and Iran need to do the presidential election, and they have to focus on stabilizing their domestic politics. So they don't have that incentives to go on a war with Israel if Israel doesn't cross the red line that, you know, they were going to eliminate the Hezbollah within Lebanon. But even for the Israel, it is almost impossible task for them to do it. So this two warfare, I mean, if the warfare between Israel and Hezbollah are kind of limited in the southern Lebanon, and it won't be a final blow to the Hezbollah, then the impact of this Israel and Hezbollah warfare won't be that big.
So the key question here is whether it will bring about a total disruption, total collapse of Hezbollah, which would then draw in Iran and also the U.S. Whether those two, Iran and the U.S., will be drawn into the war will be the key question here. But for now, that seems unlikely in your view. Professor Hee-young, meanwhile, reports indicate that Israel is close to achieving its goals in Rafah and that months of its major military operations might soon give way to a new, less intense phase of the conflict. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said the intense phase of fighting in Rafah is nearly over. Is the war in Gaza finally nearing an end?
Well, I think I've been on your program a number of times, and I've made the same point regarding this. I think it's wrong to characterize it as a war. This is a state attacking a civilian population. Obviously, there is Hamas involved in this, but this isn't an operation to deal with Hamas. This is an operation to eliminate the Palestinian people from the Gaza Strip. Now, the idea that you can win a conflict like that by destroying an entire population is not just immoral and illegal, it's also strategically a massive mistake. You know, even recently, the Israeli senior military official, Daniel Hagari, said that you can't make Hamas disappear. You know, they will simply come again. This genocide that Israel is waging against people, the Palestinian people, has created so much anger amongst the Palestinians, amongst people of the Arab world, that this is, just going to ensure that the conflict will last for decades. You know, people will naturally be inclined to take up arms against Israel for many, many years to come. And Israel has demonstrated utter contempt for the Palestinian people. And this is going to have a very lasting legacy. The scale of the destruction, the scale of the violence that the Israelis have committed against the Palestinian people really is extraordinary. You know, nearly 40,000 Palestinians have been killed, nearly 8,000 children have been killed, 1.7 million people displaced. You know, the UN report recently said that they found evidence of war crimes, crimes against humanity, violations of international humanitarian law, and extermination. So these are, objective observers from the UN using the most emotive, damning language to describe Israel's actions. And in that context, this is something that will resonate with the ordinary Palestinians, with the ordinary people throughout the Arab world, with people throughout the world more generally, who are repulsed by Israel's actions. And the idea that they can win this conflict by destroying an entire people is utterly, utterly stupid in the extreme, as well as being immoral. This is a conflict that now Israel has, because of the way Israel has waged it in this phase, is destined to scar the Middle East for many decades to come.
Professor Peck, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has dissolved the war cabinet after the resignation of two centrist politicians. What do we need to know about the dissolution, and how would it affect future ceasefire efforts?
The war cabinet will be replaced by, according to Netanyahu, the war cabinet will be replaced by a scaled-down so-called kitchen cabinet, where sensitive discussion and the consultation will take place. But the problem is there won't be a bigger change in near futures, because right now the National Security Minister of Itamar Ben-Gvir and the Finance Minister of Bezalel Smotrich are trying to come into a war cabinet, which they are the ultra hardcore, like right wing. So, and still now the Likud party, the coalition parties, are holding a majority vote in Knesset, So there's not, even though the war cabinet has been dissolved, but there is not many incentives for current leadership to change their direction to more the negotiable the body, and but the future. What I have to say is this: I mean, the main problem here for Israel is that they could not find their partner for to do the ceasefire deal with Gaza. I mean, they don't believe Hamas, and there's no entity that could substitute the Hamas. It's not whether Hamas is good or bad, but it is because Israel has been isolating the Gaza starting from 2006, causing there's no entity that could replace the Hamas. So like they said, Israel government are kind of insisting that there will be a civilian body or structure that will gonna rule the govern the Gaza Strip, but there's no any entity who could do that. So that's why it's causing Israel to move on next phase. So whether the new members comes in or the more moderate members come into the war cabinet will not gonna change much in the situation if they don't decide it whether they were gonna who they were gonna decide for the entity to make the reconstruction process of Gaza. If that is not settled, then whether which leadership comes in with a different party or leadership, it won't change that much in terms of Gaza and Israel conflict and ceasefire deal.
And our last questions for you, Dr. Haher. The U.S. is working to prevent a greater war between Israel and Hezbollah while assuring Israel that the Biden administration is fully prepared to back its ally. Now, with the U.S. presidential election now just about 5 months away, what would be the Biden administration's key priorities in the Middle East?
Well, the United States is part of the problem in this situation. It's not necessarily the solution. The U.S. could have ended the slaughter of the Palestinians months ago. It's U.S. support for Israel that has enabled Israel to carry out this genocidal campaign. And as you mentioned, the elections are, one of the reasons why the Biden administration has taken this particular stance towards Israel in the context of what it's doing in Palestine, and obviously the Israeli lobby in the United States is very strong. But it is trying to do something that really is untenable. It has an interest in maintaining a strong Israel. It doesn't want to get involved in a regional war. So it's trying to support Israel and also at the same time not annoy Arab states, which, as I say, is largely an untenable position. It's quite possible that you can, continue to placate the governments of various different Arab states, but it's the people on the ground, I think, that need to be factored into these situations. If you think back to the Arab Spring in 2011, prior to the Arab Spring, people assumed that the governments in the Arab world were so strong that it would never be overthrown. They were, able to maintain order domestically. And the Arab Spring demonstrated that the people on the ground were capable of taking action and changing the policies of the government and changing the government in certain instances. And I would suspect that the same thing is happening here. The current governments in the Arab world are trying to restrain their populations who are naturally livid at what is happening in Palestine. And Biden is hoping that these governments will do a deal with him, will not become more directly involved in what's happening in Palestine, that it'll only be Hezbollah or the Houthis or Hamas that get directly involved. But I can't see that as something that can last for much longer. And as I said before, and I think it is really worth reiterating, this conflict, the way in which it has been waged, the way Israel has behaved, will leave a lasting legacy that can't be just overlooked, that can't be brushed aside by any short-term deal that happens in the next month or 2 months or 6 months or even the next year. This is something that will, has enraged the younger population throughout the region, obviously in Palestine, And that will come back to haunt not just Israel, but the United States and the West more generally for their complicity in supporting Israel in what has been one of the most horrific campaigns ever waged.
It will have lasting ramifications for generations to come, perhaps. Thank you so much, Professor Hee-young, for sharing your insights with us tonight. And many thanks to you as well, Professor Peck, for your brilliant analysis.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you for watching, and be sure to tune in same time tomorrow to join our conversation. Goodbye for now.